This is Inclusive Insights, the podcast that unites parents of unique children,
where guests share their vulnerable stories of heartbreak and their stories of hope.
We're your hosts. I'm Nancy.
And I'm Michelle. And we're here to provide tangible support and connect parents with practical next steps.
And I'm here for the comic relief.
Today we are here with Bethany Lowery, and we're excited to jump into a conversation about the multifaceted journey of womanhood. Everything from embracing life as a devoted wife and a nurturing mother, passionate advocate for the unique ability community, to discovering the inspiring story behind the Maddox Mission Foundation, which is a beacon of hope and purpose, which was also founded in honor of her son, Maddox. So let's go ahead and dive in. All of these things, like, how do you balance that? And his response was like,
you don't.
He's like, I reject that hypothesis. And no, I mean, he didn't say that, but he's like,
he kind of did.
He did. Yeah. He was like, so my answer is not really what you're looking for, because I don't balance. It all comes from the same place. Like, it all comes from like one cup, and you're constantly pouring in one direction or the other. And I started thinking, I'm like, man, it's like, it still stuck with me because
I'm very honest about some cups only got 10%.
Yeah.
Some cups got 25. But,
yes, that's something.
Somebody doesn't get the fill.
Yes, that's something that we talk about often, because we are stretched so thin, especially like we were just talking about not having, some people don't have a huge family, or
a village. It takes a village.
Right.
Yep.
It does take a village. And I would venture to say most people actually don't have the village.
Yeah, I would agree.
So that's where, the disconnect comes in, and it makes it really difficult, because it's not so much, I think, that, society always tells us, you have to take time for yourself. You have to take time,
for your
marriage.
But that's,
that sounds nice.
They're taking a nap.
Yeah,
you should take a nap. Well, no, because the dishes are on the floor, and it doesn't work like that.
Your dishes are on the floor?
Well, if they stack up,
sometimes.
If they stack up high enough.
Yeah. So, most of the time, it's just him and I. Our only family are all out of town, over 1,000 miles away. Yeah. So it's usually just us, and you don't get to do a lot of things necessarily together or at the same time that you would want to. You find that more so, especially now with having 2 of our 3 sons in school, with events and things like that, like the last day of school,
and
they're at the same time.
Everything. You guys are
I
amazing.
really don't know.
I don't understand.
Like, every time I turn around, you're there and you look gorgeous and you're happy to be there and you're energetic. And I'm like, what in the world is happening?
Have you seen Multiplicity before, that movie?
No.
I think there's more than one of her.
Oh, yeah.
No, we do our best, but it is something that definitely puts a strain. And then whenever one of those 2 people, that's what I do full time with our kids.
Right.
But when one of those 2 people have giant obligations, on the career front, it's really, really difficult to try to coordinate. For example, when we have the parent association meetings, like, I have to arrange for him to
take time.
Leave Ocala at his office or wherever he may be in Georgia, sometimes traveling, to come and sit in the parking lot for 45 minutes so I can go to a meeting. So, it makes it tough on him. And then it's definitely not an easy thing to juggle. So we talk about that often, how it doesn't really exist sometimes, the home and the work balance.
Right.
It doesn't exist sometimes, and it's just like in relationships, even without kids, I think it's not always going to be 50-50. Everybody goes through ups and downs, and sometimes they only have 20% to give, and you have to push and give the 80.
Right.
And I think that it's just an ever changing.
Yeah. And he had said, like, what happens when we're both down? Like, who helps us up, right?
Right. And that's what kind of makes you as especially with a special needs child, because there's really no time, in the future ever really, until you close your eyes, that you're going to be empty nesters or they're going to be completely self-sufficient or anything like that. So it's not something we can just get, if we can just make it to here.
Right.
You have to kind of plan and try to figure a way to make it sustainable.
And I look at you guys and I think, you're so young, and I don't ever like to use the word burden. It's not a burden. I told your husband, God said, here's your gift.
Yeah.
And you're the ones, you were picked for this.
Yes.
But envy sneaks in, right? Envy sneaks in, and you're having to think like, okay, well, but I thought Brandon was very realistic, like, the garage apartment, things like that, still having, at some point, there's a light for you guys, right? At some point.
Yeah. It's kind of adjusting your focus and kind of you're adapting to a new normal.
Exactly.
Whenever,
and accepting it, saying, okay,
and
this is it.
I think it's inevitable and you cannot avoid it whenever you do get a diagnosis. And whether this process takes, a couple months, a week, or for us, we actually didn't share Maddox's diagnosis with anybody, even family, for close to over 4 years.
Why was that?
The grieving process.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we felt like, and it's not from a place of embarrassment. It was from a place of, if we would have shared that in a time where we were still just in not a super comfortable place with it.
You're still processing, right? Like
I don't think you ever stop. There's certain places or meetings or things you go to, and it hits you like a ton of bricks and you start crying. And actually one of those moments, the first time I met you at the curriculum meeting last year, if you remember, I came over and gave you a hug at the end. It was one of those moments, but in a thankful way. Right. And it just brought tears to my eyes, and it was just like a wave of emotions that I was just so thankful that I felt like somebody got it.
Somebody gets me.
Yes, they got it, and they're actually, working so hard to put something together that my child actually needs. Because there's so much today, which I'm thankful for any efforts that people do, or companies and initiatives and things. But there's a lot, it's a buzzword. It's trendy to be inclusive for things like
That's a good point.
What does that mean?
Yeah. And back to the, referring to it's an illusion, kind of the balance. Him and I, that's one thing for sure. We always tried to be very, very transparent and honest, because at the end of the day, when it comes to, special needs kids and families, yes, it might feel better in the moment and make it less awkward for a moment to kind of sugarcoat, find all kind of different, ways to describe or leave things out, things like that. But you're really hindering yourself in the long run, because it's hard enough when you do push and ask for what you need. Need for your child in every realm. It's unlikely that you're going to get it, even if you're, loud and you charge on and you come strong with it. So by sugarcoating things, you just put yourself further behind.
Right.
So that's definitely a hard pill to swallow, and kind of part of the grieving process. And like I said, not from a place of embarrassment, but from a place of we needed to stay focused on what we needed to do for Maddox. And we didn't want outside influence of other people's opinions.
Here's what
I
think?
Yeah, because you get so much of that.
So
yes.
I think you kind of modeled and empowered others in a beautiful way, talking about advocating for your kids loudly, right? Pursuing stuff that they need. This is not like a luxury. You're not asking for like, ooh, could I have this extra thing? This is a day-to-day absolute baseline need for them. Yes. And I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that's where the heart of Maddox Mission came from.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about Maddox Mission, and where did that come from? And what is your goal with that?
So it came from a place of just basically life experience and, experiencing what it's like to try to navigate as a parent with a child with autism. Maddox was diagnosed when he was right at his second birthday on World Autism Day, actually, uniquely enough.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
And we were actually on a waiting list to get in with the developmental pediatrician. It was like a 1.5 waiting list.
Yeah.
And Brandon and I both called every single day for months.
One day we did
that
advocating thing again.
Yeah. And luckily enough, even though they have a waiting list a mile long that there's, they go down through. It's the same thing. We happened to be on the phone. Person just had a cancellation and they got us in, and it happened to just randomly be on World Autism Day, which I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know anything about autism. No.
Why would you?
No. So whenever he got diagnosed, in an instant, in that you go in a doctor's office, like any other checkup, you think, I had no idea at all.
It wasn't on your radar.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, I thought
you don't get pregnant and say, okay, so here are some things that could possibly.
I think that if you didn't have anybody that you knew,
Was he your first?
Yes, he was our first.
So it was like first everything, right? Like,
yes.
And how long had you been married when you got?
We had been married when he was diagnosed, we were married going on 3 years.
So everything's still new.
Yes.
Like everything's still new.
Yes. And we actually, we've said it was really tough and a real test and a real testament to, finding a way to make it through really difficult times. Because people always talk about, the honeymoon phase and when you're, you first get married and, you wait until this or that. And we had a series right in a row right after we got married. We had like 2-3 months later, Brandon's mom passed away. We went through that. And then shortly after that, a year or so after that, we actually moved his father, who needed care, down to Florida with us from North Carolina. And we took care of him. And a few months later, he had passed away.
Oh my gosh.
And then
that's a lot on a newly married couple.
Yes.
You guys hit the
yes.
ground
And
running,
I was pregnant. Yes. And I was pregnant with Maddox right after we had to move his father down here. So there was a lot of moving parts. There were a lot of tests and trials in a young marriage. So we didn't really ever have the easy honeymoon phase.
Right.
It was a lot of heavy things. And then after we had Maddox, he was, it was such a bright spot in kind of the circle of life.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Maddox, Brandon's father did get to meet Maddox, which was really special. Yes. Right. It was really special. And Maddox's middle name is actually after him, Maddox James. So it's very special.
Yeah, I love that.
But then shortly after that was when our pediatrician at the time, they, in hindsight, were not very proactive. Maddox was not hitting any of the milestones, cognitive, speech, any of that.
And they hadn't said anything?
And you fill out the
the
questionnaire. So every time when I marked, this went on 3, 4, 5 appointments where, I started saying, hey, he's not meeting these. I'm marking that he's not meeting these. Like, is there something, further that we need to do or we should look at it? And it was kind of, okay,
you had to ask.
We'll recheck.
Oh.
I can't get over that. You had to ask.
At what age are they saying? Well,
like 1 to 2. Oh. Yeah, right at the screening mark. So in my head, even though, I didn't imagine autism or what that even meant.
You knew enough to know, like, hey, he's not meeting.
Yes, but he was more so at the time, as they get older, the gap becomes bigger and bigger between the typical developing peers and him. But at the time, when they're 1, 2, the biggest thing that we noticed, because he met everything physically, he's always met everything physically, we noticed just the speech. He didn't talk. And then also at the time, the lining everything up, he would just line every toy up
but see,
in order.
So some of that is developmental for all kids, right? At a certain point. And so as a mom going through, you have these kind of, even as a new mom, right? Like you have these milestones in the back of your head and be like, okay, they're holding their own head. Right.
Yes.
Like they can lift their head up or, oh, hey, they rolled over.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So even not being fully educated or even looking for anything, you kind of have this like gray area in the back where you're like just mentally making a little check.
Right.
And the lining up is one of those things that it's like, oh, okay, they're learning how to organize or they need control over their environment just a little bit right now. And but at some point, right, when it becomes very apparent, you're like, oh, okay, well, they're still doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe he'd be babbling while
and my personality,
and...
I would always just try to make I naturally try to make light of situations.
Yeah.
So, when he would do that, and especially I think a big part, first time mom, absolutely everything they do, you're like, oh, this is so cute. Yeah.
Taking pictures of him lining things up. Do you have some pictures of him? Yeah.
Yes. We laugh now. By the third baby, like Maddox had, and people would talk about, like everyone we knew would talk about it at work conventions everywhere that we'd only see once a year. But, through social media, they would see, I would literally post like an entire album of Maddox every day. Like his whole day. So Maddox is like a whole album.
He's going to have like
every
a
day
whole
of his
history
life.
just like laid out for him. Yeah.
Yes. And our third one was like, oh no, I missed his birthday post on the day this year. But you're more present and I'm more present in the moment.
I mean, there's only so much of you to go around.
Yeah. So I'm like, Brax, sorry, you have one album.
Yeah,
this whole year.
Have a birthday. I'm not kidding. You really did.
We had a really great party. But
it's right here.
Yes.
Yeah. So the pediatrician finally, did they respond to your?
No. So they did not. And again, first time mom, you don't know that. It doesn't go off like, oh, this pediatrician is.
And you put in all your trust in the pediatrician because he's the pediatrician.
That's their job.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's definitely something that comes over time. The natural, it's unfortunate, but you almost have to question everything. And you have to
be your child.
Yes.
Advocate.
And you have to do your own research. And that is the biggest thing. I have a lot of friends, people that we know who are just going through with younger kids exactly what we went through with Maddox at 2 years old. And, it's almost been, it helped me a lot, a couple of years back whenever we did decide to share Maddox's diagnosis with everybody. It was a very scary thing to do. And it was such a relief. And I had dreaded it for over 4 years. It was just this
unknown.
weight.
Like, how will this go over? What will happen?
Yes.
Will we be ostracized?
Yes. And it was almost
will people in blame.
Yes. And it's almost like your conscience whenever, you haven't told somebody something and it's just this looming heavy on you. And the biggest factor that kind of made us decide to share when we did, it was at the point where I think he was in kindergarten at the time. We said, he's now, when he was 2, it kind of, every doctor and places kind of give you that, well, we don't know. He could start talking. He could be super high functioning. He could never talk. He may live on his own. And, it's just such a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, at the time we were like, we don't want to label him. What if he, a year from now starts talking and
you don't want to go negative, right?
Yeah,
your
and he
brain
could
is
just
not going to
be
allow you to
in
just
mainstream,
go. Exactly.
And
with a little help,
not feel any different. So that's kind of what we were waiting to see. But then when we got to the point when we did share his diagnosis with everybody, we said, it's to the point now where some of those, the same behaviors they do when they're 2 and they're flapping and spinning around and not answering people when they're talking to them, when it was cute when they were 2,
right?
When they're 4 or 5 years old, people are really tough on them, and they're tough on the parents. And we said, it's not fair to him for people to just label him as non-compliant or bad or some of those misused labels with kids without explaining why. And of course, there's always going to be people, in life that still misuse, the descriptive words and the way they treat them or still deny that autism is even
a thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's a huge majority of people, thank goodness, that today in this day and age that have a lot more understanding. And if they don't have understanding, they have enough awareness that they want to learn and they want to understand.
Right.
And, and you have those.
We have a long way to go, but
yes.
People just seem more
yes.
acceptant. The child is not based upon the behavior. They're a child.
And I think too, people are starting to realize and see there's very few families and people that don't know somebody close to them
Everybody's
that's
touched
affected by it because of how fast it's growing. And I think that is going to be something that society as a whole in the next, 10 years is really going to have to look at and address how we do a lot of things, and even school systems, because you can't keep removing these kids and try to find, we're so blessed and so thankful that we live near somewhere like the First Hope, because that doesn't exist. A lot, I would venture to say most places, not like that, not what the First Hope offers and the way they do it. It's really incredible. And, if you've ever kind of walked any type of difficult path before you got there to, and kind of look at what the options are, it really puts in perspective. If people don't necessarily recognize that, I think fortunately they haven't had to kind of evaluate.
They haven't gone through the negative.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And that's great. Like, I hope they don't. But, it's really, really special what the First Hope does. And it was honestly life changing and saving for me and moving forward with Maddox and our family.
You have been a driving force in the community that we have. So we, whether it's through the church or whether it's through the school or whether it's through just being locally here in Central Florida, you have been a driving force in a lot of ways, not just modeling, advocating for your child, right? But building community. And I don't even know that maybe you're aware of how much you do it. But I was telling Nancy, every time I turn around, she has shown up with like a basket of muffins and a smile on her face and just this beautiful, positive energy. And when, like earlier, right? So can we just get real life right now, right? So we're downtown and I walked downstairs to meet Bethany downstairs, and her and Brandon were switching off. Literally, the car is sitting in front of the building. She gets out of the driver's seat. He gets into the driver's seat. Their 3 kids are in the back seat. And you're smiling. She gives me a hug. And she's like, I'm so excited to be here. A little nervous. And then you look at me and you say, so did he tell you what's going on with the kids? And I'm like, well, no. Are they alive still? Are they good?
We were warned about the little one not maybe wanting him to get in the car.
Right. So are you ready for this?
What?
She goes, do I smell okay? Am I good? And I'm like, well, yeah, no, I just gave you a hug. You smell great. Because what was going on? Like, I couldn't tell.
Right when we were pulling in and Brandon was getting out to come in first, Brax got our youngest, who's 2. He got nauseous and projectile vomited about 7 times.
Okay.
So,
only 7 times?
Yes. So so it was fun. So we spent the hour while Brandon was in here driving around trying to get the vomit clean. And
oh my God. And everybody's in the car. All 3 boys are in the car.
Yeah, they're all in the car, and we didn't bring a diaper bag because, they were fresh. We were only going to be in there. It's quick. We just brought a little tote bag.
Were you
with
going,
some stuff.
Brandon's time's bound to be done anyway.
I'm
pretty sure we're supposed to switch, right?
But I think that and immediately I also had a time that I remembered, my daughter, we had a long drive and a long day in front of us, and same exact thing happened. And I don't know that this is necessarily the stuff that we just talk about. You don't be like, hey, how's your day going? Oh, great. Well, this just happened. And
I just got vomited on 7 times. But the day is amazing. I can't wait to come in and be on your podcast.
Right. The raw reality of this human journey and how much it affects all of us. And you do it with such positivity and such grace and such love, and you're pouring out. You're not you have every opportunity to say, you know what, it's me, my husband, our 3 kids, and we're going to survive. Right. And you pull your focus inward and say, at any cost, our family is going to survive. But you have stepped into this position where now you're reaching out to others, and it doesn't take away the fact that you're still having to survive, right? You're still having to clean up the vomit in the back seat.
That I'm judging over here? I would have been we're going home.
Yeah. Like,
And I'm
cancel the day.
And I'm
It
going
is
back to
done.
bed.
Yeah.
Because that was enough to fill the whole day.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And yet you come and
But
you
you're
pour.
like, this is important. This is important.
Yeah, you pour
Is it-
into others.
It's okay to be about yourself. It's okay.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I
But it's all
appreciate it
true.
so much. Like I have goosebumps. And circling back to, I got a little off topic, but have so much to say and talk about.
Yeah,
You
no,
know, we
absolutely.
get the opportunity to be together. But circling back to when you ask where the Maddox Mission came from and kind of what we focus on and where I want to see it go is exactly that in a nutshell. It's the experience that we've learned firsthand, and it's not been an easy ride. Like
It's not
been
pretty.
No,
It's not
been
perfect
a
or
messy,
beautiful.
vomit,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
stress-filled ride the past 6.5 years. But since his diagnosis, but I will say, and I wholeheartedly 1,000% believe, and there's really nothing else that you can do anyway. You know, it's not something that you're going to change.
Right.
So you can either, you know, like I said, it took us 4 years to kind of grieve that life and, you know, that motherhood that you envisioned.
Yeah.
And I guarantee that nobody's, you know, envision of motherhood includes special needs.
No.
Mhm.
You know, you know, they may differ how we would all raise our kids or where we'd like to see them end up and, you know, things of that nature. But nobody, I mean, even if you did have that thought, you can't fathom it until you're in it and how it changes absolutely everything, including yourself as a person. So, I mean, this is where I think you have to really lean into your faith. And
Yeah.
sometimes when you don't have that community,
Mhm.
and I don't know if you'll ever have or find a community big enough, you know, or enough support to ever feel like, whew, like that
Yeah.
was a load taken off.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
You're
probably
like, oh, it's
never
done.
going
He
to
doesn't
happen.
come
Yeah.
home with you either, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you have
That's
the
true.
support while you're out. We talked about Sundays and how awesome it is the three of them can go to their separate
Yes.
things. The two of you can go and worship together as a couple.
Yes.
But
Called it your Sunday morning date nights.
let's say you spend 3 hours out of the house, but then you know, reality comes back because again,
Yes.
it's just the two of you.
Right.
And I maybe this is on your realm to say, but is bravery an insult? I'm not sure. Of saying, okay, we're gonna have another child. You know?
Yes.
We're exhausted and we don't even know what we're doing, but you know what? I want a bigger family.
Yes. So relating to the core of where and why I started the Maddox Mission, a little bit different than the typical, you know, there's a ton of autism, everything from support to resources to information, things like that. So it kind of seemed, you know, because I thought about it for a good 2-3 years, how and what I could start or do to something with it. But obviously there's nothing, you know, you're more passionate about than,
Your
you know, this
child,
life with your
yeah.
child. So I wanted to do something. But as time went on and the more and more, you know, I kind of looked at the big picture, and I always guide by him, and I think he does a really good job also in the career front by thinking from, like he gave you that answer about, I think sometimes it doesn't exist about the balance. You have to kind of look at stuff from situations you've been in and what you needed in that moment. Because a lot of times you go to, you know, big events, sporting events, all different types of things. And like I said before, again, you're thankful for any support or any type of acknowledgement.
Right.
But sometimes, I mean, sometimes it's enough and it's good. But sometimes in some kids, because like we said, it's a spectrum, you know, a bag of fidget toys is not enough.
Right.
That's
That's truly helpful.
No. And there's so many things like that where I struggle because I want to, you know, be overly like, oh, you know, so thankful and like, this is just amazing. But at the same time, I think you have to, you know, if you ever have the opportunity, which surprisingly, I actually have had quite a few opportunities and where people have asked my input
Amazing.
from a parent perspective, which I'm super thankful for
Right.
that.
I mean, you're walking the walk. Who else can give?
Yeah. And sometimes that's not enough. And it's the parents that end up really falling by the wayside in society, parents of special needs kids. And that gap between feeling inclusive and feeling supportive continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger as your child gets older, because now that gap between them and typical developing peers is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And a lot of times these bigger companies and brands and everywhere you go, during the month of April, we light it up blue. And that's great. That it's nice to see that.
I have a friend that says, okay, April's over, so we no longer have autism. Because everyone brings so much to the table in April.
Yes.
And then, and she's a parent of 2 boys with unique abilities. And she's like, okay, whew, thank goodness April's over.
Yeah.
Now we can go back to something else.
Yes. And, and they always show too during April, it's a great photo opportunity, get the kids in there. And,
exactly.
It's great for
the awareness
our
is great. Like in the information age, the awareness is great. And I feel like it's something that we will need to have more and more of. Yeah. But what I hear you saying is that you really wanted to provide more depth, more tangible
of it.
And specifically for the parents.
Right.
That is what I want to focus on. Obviously along the way, the kids are always incorporated as well, but there is a huge need for support, and not support in the sense of, I don't even know what a good example would be for something that doesn't matter, but what you just did a few minutes ago, ready to bust out crying whenever you just said, it's just that somebody sees and recognizes that, you show up every day.
Yep.
And I think in a world, in a society, in a time where those things go unnoticed,
right?
Especially as a stay-at-home mom, if you want to call it that today. Most moms don't stay at home.
No.
But I think a lot of times you struggle with that to start with, it kind of being the thankless and kind of the invisible job. But then when you add on top of it all of these things that you're managing for a special needs child, between advocating, it's just a constant. There's hardly a day that goes by if your child isn't with you, if they're at therapy or school or different things, they're bound to, it's more likely than not that like somebody calls you,
you're gonna get a
that
call.
there's a,
Right.
there's a problem, you need to be there, or what do we
Right.
do? We can't handle this. We're not equipped. We don't know what to do, or whatever it may be. Everybody always has so much suggestion for what you still need to do, and you're like, barely surviving.
I just
It's
need a little empathy right now.
Yeah,
Can you just listen?
man, I've done my absolute best, but there's no letting up, and that invisible load continues to grow as well.
Right.
And I think that any parent of a special needs child would tell you, like, if even just that small little gesture or compliment verbally to someone, which is it's so easy. You don't even think twice about it. You pass someone on the street.
Doesn't she know? Doesn't she know?
Yeah,
I think she's
and you're like,
doing a great job.
good
No,
job.
She needs.
You don't
She
think
needs
much
a little
of it.
pat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also when you start looking into kind of the sad, dark side, like reality of the mental health effects of parents, and especially, I know you've touched on the other episodes, the divorce rate, and even beyond that, the suicide rates of special needs parents, it's high.
Yeah.
It's high.
The breaking point is there, and nobody talks about it. So
Right.
no one
And it's
talks
heavy.
about it. So then something bad happens because no one's bringing it to light.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's something very heavy to carry, especially through your day to day. And you're like, how do I function in the basics when I'm carrying this heaviness with me?
Yes. Right? And you look at companies who are therapy companies, ABA, speech, OT, that our kids need and use. We've noticed from the parent standpoint over the past couple years, a variety of different of those therapy companies, where they have implemented over the past couple years, mental health days for their therapists, which I agree, that's great. But, this is something I actually, with a previous company we were with, I advocated very heavily for, and, kind of had a lot of back and forth, kind of heated back and forth with them. They want you to sign an agreement that you understand that you will lose your ABA therapist if you miss whatever the number was, three or more sessions in whatever time period it is. And that's just policy. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Like even, things that just come up emergency with kids. And at the same time, they implemented that their therapists could take mental health days when they need it because mental health is important. We need to take a step.
Don't they marry each other?
You need to take a step back and look, and that's the difference I think that you see at First Hope as a school.
We don't have mental health days.
We don't.
Well, we all just come with
I didn't mean the mental health part.
Just kidding.
No.
We don't get breaks.
Just kidding. The dedication, and just being genuine in the fact that you guys are there and you serve these families and you understand the people that you have there is what, a building doesn't make any school or place of business. And you can tell places and businesses like the specific therapy company that, recounting this discussion about, you can tell when people are clocking in for a job and when people are there because it's in their heart and because they're passionate about this purpose.
Yeah.
And there's no room. There is zero, in my eyes, there is zero wiggle room for that in any position that works with special needs children, because these children are vulnerable. They can't, a lot of them, my child can't tell me, can't stick up for himself.
Right.
And, and
the vulnerability.
Yes,
of it
they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
For you too, right? You're a vulnerable parent. You're dropping off a very precious gift.
There's nothing more.
And praying the other side is receiving.
Yes.
I feel like we all come to work with our eyes wide open.
Yeah.
Yes.
We chose that job.
Yes.
But I feel like we also feel called.
Yes.
As
that's a whole nother.
I feel like, like there is a spiritual.
You can try to resist it, but unfortunately it's not our path. Somebody else is saying, this is your journey.
Right.
Which is the same with, like you said, with the parents who were chosen.
Yes.
You spend part of that grieving process.
Why me?
Why me? I don't want to be chosen.
Right.
I can't handle it. But that's where you have to. There's nothing else that you can do than to believe and lean on your faith that there was a reason for that. And, over time, I've come to wholeheartely 100% believe that, I'm such a completely different person, than I was before before Maddox's diagnosis. Even having Maddox for the first 2 years, how I parented and just how I was as a person in general. And not that it was a bad version,
right? But
just kind of being unaware of certain things and not as, if you don't have a reason to be aware of those things.
Why would you?
Right. And
exactly.
I think a lot of people, we see that a lot of these parents will, say that friends, family, people who that you think would get it because they're close to you or you try to explain it. I think it's really hard to understand that completely and what you're going through to the full degree of it.
Exactly.
Unless you experience it.
They have to walk it. If they don't walk it, and leave your opinions at home.
So I think over time for me, looking back and reflecting on myself and how I am now versus before the diagnosis, it forces you don't really have a choice. Once you get past the initial grieving, it forces you to put that armor on and to just become this totally different version of yourself. Yeah. And that's what I do believe, that God chooses you and he and that child and their needs mold you into the person that you were supposed to and needed to be all along, and that you need to be for your child.
And it's beautiful how he will equip you. You know, you have those like little sayings that go on the wall. You know, if you walk into grandma's house or mom's house, like they'll have those things written on the wall. And I'll never forget walking into my mom's house and there's this saying like, God will never take you where he will not keep you. And one time in particular that really hit me hard because I was going through a huge life change and I was thinking, okay, well, why would God bring me here? Why would God put this in my life? And even if there wasn't an actual reason, right? It doesn't matter. He will equip you through that. And then watching you take the next step, which is, okay, not only has God equipped me to like walk through this journey, now he has equipped me to impart that to others. And I'm still baffled. I'm sitting here thinking like, wait a second, you're telling me that you have a foundation that is for parents? It's not for
both,
for the parents.
For both, but projects that specifically aim, we're still trying to, you know, it's going to be ever changing and kind of evolving as the needs evolve.
Needs to be, right. It needs to be.
Yeah. And as the need changes.
Right.
The same
with our kids in every aspect.
Right.
You have to be flexible. So you put them in anybody working with your kid, you're kind of desperate. Like, you need to be able to be flexible and adapt with them. Like, they're never going to just be able to be this straight and narrow, just even killed all the time. And neither are we as parents.
And you can't say, well, they say, maybe this will happen next.
Right.
Maybe this will happen next.
Yes.
And you never know.
And then you're just disappointed all the time.
Yes. Yeah. I would say so when we decided to do, which it's fairly new, we officially launched the Maddox Mission on World Kindness Day this past year in the fall. So I thought, what better day to kind of kick that off, because that's essentially what it is. It's kindness based. It's kind of getting back to basics that, you know, we should have never gotten away from.
Right.
But the simple idea of being kind to people, you know, even if their kid is typical, different or not, you don't understand why their kid's doing what they're doing.
Right.
It's not for you to understand.
No, it's not.
Just love them.
Right. And if you can't do that, you don't need to say anything.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But just encouraging people to, that's kind of the motive behind it, to just be kind, which is a very simple thing to do. And it's been the biggest thing. It's been therapeutic, I would say, for me. And it came from a place of, okay, well, I'm not getting this as a parent from society and the world. So
let's create.
I want to give it to other people. And in some way, your mind sometimes in situations thinks, well, maybe if I give it to others, you know, it'll come back to me.
Right.
So it's, and on top of it, kind of making that opportunity and that space to use this as a guideline and a teaching opportunity for my kids. You know, it can be challenging. A big question that we always get from people who don't have kids on the spectrum: can you explain to our kids, how do you explain to kids what's the best way? And they're being super respectful, and I love that they ask that.
Genuine, right?
But I'm still searching for it. It's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough.
There's a lot of times there are not black and white answers, and every child is different, typical or non-typical. Every child will be different.
But if you just say, you know what, I can't really explain that right now, but just tell them to be kind.
Yes.
Just tell them to be kind to all the kids they see.
The beauty of kids that you see, though, is that they don't see. And that, I think that's been the hardest part for me, because when we have done we're very active, you know, we try to be a part of all of the, you know, autism events and walks and all of the things. So when we go to that stuff, obviously my younger two, they're typical, though, like middle, second, third child boys. So they're naturally just loud, all boy, you know, running around, high energy. So trying to explain to them why that's going to upset and bother, you know, everybody else at this event.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it even harder, because they don't see Maddox any different.
Right.
So
Exactly.
He's just their brother.
they're
That's-
actually a lot tougher on him than
Yeah.
people like at school or in public would be. So when you mention about having the bravery or courage to have more kids, as crazy as this probably sounds to a lot of people, a lot of people have asked me over time during Daxton and then my third pregnancies, Brax's pregnancy, you know, man, like even people who have kids on the spectrum that have one kid, like, man, like, why or how would you do that? Like we're all struggling so hard with one.
Right.
But it is true. Sometimes Brandon and I are like, oh my gosh, did we think this through?
What did we do?
Wow, we're outnumbered. and two, we're in deep right now.
Right.
Like, our
As
kids
toddler,
are 8, 4, and 2.
Oh, yeah.
So for the past 8 years, like we've been changing diapers for 8 years
That's
straight.
oh,
2 strollers, you know, the diaper bag,
Lord
all
have
of it.
mercy.
So yeah, we are in.
And my brain goes like, so what's throw up? Throw up's
Yeah,
nothing.
that
What
is
are you talking
nothing.
about?
Yeah, it's
Take
just
it
part
in
of the
stride.
daily life.
Yeah.
Yes. So we kind of got to a point, you know, after Maddox's diagnosis, after some time went on, I think it was like maybe a year and a half or so after he was diagnosed, where, and I there's just some things, you know, in life and in your memory that moment is always just ingrained in your brain, and you can still like picture yourself, what you're wearing, and you're sitting there and all of that. And at the time, we were going to speech therapy at a really great place in Winter Park. And we drove from Winter Garden side of town to Winter Park for it yet. But it was very, very busy. They had a lot of different therapies there through the hospital and stuff. So, but when you have one kid, it's not a problem. That's centered around that. Like, I'm here to live,
Right,
you know,
right.
just for everything
This
you
is
need
all
all day
about
long.
Maddox.
Yes.
That's it. Yep.
Yes. So we just started going there, and of course, Brandon was working, so I would take Maddox, and I was starting to feel the full effects of kind of that depressing wave and that realization of like, man, this is like this is your normal. Like, this is what you're going to be doing the rest of your life. This is it. You know, this isn't like we're sick, we're in the hospital for a few weeks.
Fixed.
Yeah.
We're almost fixed.
Yeah, like this is what it's going to be forever, just for maintenance, if nothing else.
Right.
And sitting there, you know, what kind of contributed to that for me personally, I think because what I had pictured, and God has a funny way of giving you what you need, not necessarily what you want.
Right.
Yep.
And me being super, super girly girl.
Did I need 3 boys?
Yes, I never imagined ever in my life having a boy. One boy.
Let
Typical
alone 3.
developing boy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had 3 boys, 1 special needs. So that was, you know, a shock for me having a boy. And first of all, because before I had Maddox, you know, I owned a dance studio, and I danced at the theme parks, did character performing. So that's what I've done my whole life. That's actually what I moved to Orlando
definitely
from
prepping
Pennsylvania
you.
for.
Right? That's exhausting. That's exhausting.
Yes. So
Yeah.
even before
I can handle
special
anything.
needs,
Yeah.
I was like, football, basketball, like what?
What am I doing?
Like, I don't know what to do with
Form of
this.
dance. It's just another form of dance.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that was a shock to start with for me, you know, trying to figure out like, what am I gonna do like with a boy in life, you know, and then this, like, I really don't know what to do. This is not what I planned at all.
Right.
So sitting there in that office, just as there's a spectrum of kids, there's a spectrum of parents too. You know, some parents
love that.
dive all in, bumper stickers, shirts,
So true.
the whole 9 yards. And then some, like we were doing at the time, you're uncomfortable, you haven't told anybody, you're still trying to pass it off of, oh, it's a speech delay.
Right. It's a phase.
And I don't know if I answered your question at the beginning. We got a little off topic. But when the pediatrician did not, you know, tell us we needed to do anything further, I just felt I was only worried about his speech. So I took him upon myself. I took him to a speech therapist to start speech. And I think we were like 3 weeks in, And she's also, I frequently think about reaching out to her because we were over in like the Sanford Lake Mary area at the time. So we don't see her and we couldn't go there, or else we still would for his speech. She was so just a good person.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget how she was the one that first said to me, I think that we may need to go to a developmental pediatrician and get him assessed and kind of look into the elephant in the room. I like oblivious what's the elephant? Like he's here to,
wait,
he
there's
can't
an
talk.
elephant?
You're not going to help him talk.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's like, autism. I was like, I'm like Googling when we leave, like, what is autism?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't,
my goodness.
so
And
we
she was
did
the first one who kind of offered you
that ever mentioned
any-
that.
Wow.
Anything, not the doctor.
And
Wow.
she's looking at you like, the
the thing.
the elephant.
But
The
she
thing.
was so,
And
the
you're like,
way she did it was actually so great. And
Oh.
the thing I will
if
never.
she's already a good person, you already feel good. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
Yes. And I had so much
kindness
hope
and
because.
kindness.
Yes, because I felt so vulnerable even just going to
Of course.
speech. Like, my kids, you're going, my kid's
Right.
not talking.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Don't tell
like, so
anyone.
embarrassed.
Yeah.
We're here for the service.
Yeah.
'Cause he's
The
just-
back doors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I already I just felt so the first person I was vulnerable with,
Yeah.
with my child. So I felt this, even though in hindsight, it's like 3 times I met with her. Really weren't that
It doesn't
deep
matter.
yet,
Those
but-
were really important.
Right. And I think that's what makes her such a great provider is
Mhm.
that's the goal, I think, should be for anybody that works with kids with special needs.
Right.
You should make those parents and those kids from day one feel like I'm meant to be here.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to help me and you care about my child, not just a session to check off the list.
Hey, you have autism. I'm here for you.
So,
Okay, thank you for the direct.
yes.
I love it.
Well, that's what we experienced, though, when we got diagnosed, which I hear most people say that it's so cold.
Mm-hmm. Clinical.
It's I mean, we were in there less than 5 minutes. You go in thinking like, we're ruling this out, like this couldn't be, and they literally just blew bubbles and could tell by, he didn't have any eye contact.
Right.
And at the time, in your head, you're like, I mean, how could they know?
Yeah.
Because
I've been looking for 3 years.
I've had
Yeah.
a number of parents we'll say assessments can take, up to an hour. And then within 10 minutes, we're kind of coming back out to the lobby. They're like, wait, you're done already?
yes.
And it's a very vulnerable moment because if it's so apparent to someone else within 60 seconds, you're sitting there like, but wait, this is my everyday life. How did I not see it? Right.
Yes.
And in that moment, I have seen that parents are incredibly vulnerable and no one thinks about, okay, take a moment with the parent
Right.
to say,
Yes.
Right.
how would you know? Right? We're clinicians, we're trained,
Yes.
this is we live and breathe it. You're just living life. Of course you didn't know. Like
Right.
how would you know?
And it's just for example, in the equivalent, just like surgeons, they open up a body on the operating table and they go and eat their lunch right after. They don't think
Right.
anything of it. If to the typical person,
Exactly.
you would be scarred by
Yeah.
seeing
I'm not
that. You
eating
could-
for a month.
No,
so,
absolutely.
yes.
No.
Yeah.
And that's something I hope I have a whole, like I did before we started the Maddox Mission, I had this whole binder and hundreds of pages of just kind of jotted down like thoughts and ideas and things that I want to find a way and create a way to kind of touch on.
Yeah.
And that's something that I would, in the long run, we're, thinking and working on and trying to brainstorm ideas that to find a way to give some type of a comfort to the parents or something along those lines when they get a diagnosis, because that is probably the most life-changing day of their whole life.
Yeah. So if there is a parent or a family that maybe wants to partner with Maddox Mission, or if they want to be a part of it or just reach out and be part of that community, how can they find you? How can they find Maddox Mission?
So you can visit us on our website. It's themaddoxmission.com. If you just look up Maddox Mission, it's actually like a dog nonprofit or something in
That's not
another
you.
state. So
Okay,
it's
that's
the
not him.
Maddox
That's not
Mission.
That is not you. So the Maddox
Yes,
Mission.
and the contact
Okay.
information and our social media outlets are on there.
They can reach out to you.
Yes.
Maddox Mission.
Yeah, the Maddox Mission. And I'm, like you said, with juggling and trying to find a balance,
Yeah.
been a little behind in the summer on updating, some of the stuff on the social media pages. But getting back here in the groove, we do have quite a few events. That's kind of where I've found the best way over the past year to reach the people, the group, and kind of convey the message and the feeling that we're trying to provide. We did our first, which is going to be an annual thing. We did an event, Celebrate the Spectrum, in April. And it was so amazing. We had it at Giovanni's in Lake Nona. And it was sold out. We did 50 tickets, and it sold out pretty quickly. And they're free. We just have to reserve a ticket through the website. So the venue capacity.
So how many are coming,
it doesn't exceed the venue capacity. But we provided an Italian luncheon for them, and we gave away, all of it's completely free. And up until this point, everything that we've done has just been donation from Brandon and I, giving back to other parents.
If there were other corporations or people who wanted to partner in this vision with you, they could also kind of reach out to you on your website and contact you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And we gave away, I think, 35 gift baskets. We raffled them off, kid and adult ones. I think there was over 150 items. And we had Mickey Mouse there in his, he did a character appearance in his Autism Awareness Blue.
Perfect.
He looked great. And we had a lot of really fun things, and just where, you can go and enjoy an event and talk and kind of have community with other people that are in the same thing you're going through. And you don't have to worry about your kids laying under the table or your kids flapping, right? We get it. Everybody, we get it.
It's a room full of acceptance, which is amazing.
Yes. And the reason that I named it Celebrate the Spectrum for our April, Autism Awareness Month event was I wanted it to be a celebration where, a lot of times in April, everything's like awareness or like inclusion, which we do need, but there's still sometimes, you can be really excited and be at an event, and then like we talked about the waves of that emotion where you're like, oh, why do I have to like beg people to include my kid? It's so draining, which the work still needs to be done, and we have to do it. But you never find an event where we're like, we're going to celebrate. And the parents too, we're going to celebrate the work that we do.
Right.
Absolutely.
We need to.
And all the little milestones.
Yes.
Brandon talked a little bit about that too. Just like it's okay that our celebrations come at different ages than yours.
Yes.
But man, let's celebrate them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Let's celebrate them.
Sometimes people they'll be so small, like, he didn't do this today, or something tiny, and other people are like,
and we're over here like, what?
Like, no, this is major.
Yes.
And I think the biggest thing you have to do is being able to get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Or else you can't be the person and the advocate that your child needs you to be.
Right. Yeah.
It's, you have to do a lot of really uncomfortable things.
Yeah.
And you have to be a person sometimes that you're like, oh, that's not my personality.
Right.
And that was me. I mean, even a year and a half ago, the beginning of last summer. And that was me, where I was afraid to, even though we'd been in this and I got comfortable about talking about autism and things like that, to anybody, and kind of finding comfort in when they were starting their journey, telling them like, I know what you're going through, and kind of helping them and comforting them in that, and sharing as many resources as possible, because that's another thing that's so vivid in your mind at the diagnosis. They don't, well, for us anyway, our experience, she looked at him, he wasn't sitting in the chair, no eye contact, she, marked on the paper and said, yeah, he has autism, schedule 3 months at the front.
Right.
And I was like, wait.
Nobody sent you off with a box.
I was like, what does that mean?
This is what you do. Here's a box. Take this home.
Here's the guide.
Right.
Here's the kit.
And
here's the directions and instructions.
Yeah.
No,
and
where
do I go now?
It wouldn't work anyway if you had one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because everybody's is so different.
Right.
And I really, really try to remind myself and be so vigilant and I've had this a lot recently over the past couple months when it comes down to therapies, schools, trials, everything under the sun. Everybody has a different opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like you talk to other special needs parents, you think we should all be on the same page.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not. And I try to be so vigilant about never like writing off or not trying something or questioning something that seems to be working well for us because somebody else's experience and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
It might not have worked for them, but I think that you have to give your child the chance to try whatever. And I think the biggest guide that you can have, and that is my biggest piece of advice to any parent that has a child that was just diagnosed, is to follow, like, do not question your parental instinct. I mean, there is nothing stronger. That is the whole backbone of the Maddox Mission. And my biggest thought on the entire thing in navigating autism and parenting, I went the first 3 years of just tiptoeing around every doctor, therapist, specialist, everybody that are the professionals.
Right.
And I do respect them, and I love and welcome and want and seek out any and every piece of information that any professional has to make an educated decision about stuff with like Brandon and I. But what I don't stand for is the way that many of those people and those meetings and offices and appointments and things like that, how they try to make you feel if you don't agree with exactly what they suggest. And I experienced that last summer firsthand before we came to First Hope. And it was a real eye-opener for me. It put me in a situation where, I was totally uncomfortable and sick over it, but it was just another level of having to evolve into the parent that your kid needs.
Right.
And putting your foot down. And a lot of times they'll blatantly, tell you, like we have had where, they say they cannot, that's not an option when it is an option. But I think a lot of times they think that you're not going to question, because you don't know.
Their word is authority, right?
Yeah. And
Their
that's
word is authority.
where I think community comes in and is so important, because it gives you the freedom to have discussion. It gives you the empowerment to have, people by your side. You don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to approach it the same way. You can be on opposite spectrums from the other parent as far as like how you approach things, but to know that you're not alone and you are empowered, and there's 1,000 different approaches and there's 1,000 different ways. So I thank you so much for creating a community where parents can come together and to feel supportive. And it's life-changing. It seems like a small movement in a small direction, and maybe in your mind you're like, oh well, it's just this event or it's just this website. No, it is life-changing for parents to know that they're supported, know that they have a community they can reach out to, and that if they want to be mama bear, they're going to have other mama bears right there next to them advocating. So true. And so thank you so much, and thank you for meeting with us and having the hard conversations with us so that other parents can gain from that. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Inclusive Insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, and leave us a review.